Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are connecting with us from. I'm Virginia Stagni, the founder of FT Talent and head of business development here at the Financial Times. And we are starting a fantastic House of Talent night, the first virtual one that we are hosting here at Bracken House in London at the Financial Times TV studio with the founder of Female Lead, Edwina Dunn. Hi, Edwina. How are you doing tonight?
Virginia, I'm delighted to be here. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks for, of course, our audience to be with us today and all the female lead community and the FT Talent community to connect. And of course, ask questions, because this night is a conversation with Edwina about funding, of course, a startup, being a startupper at any age, at any stage of your life, thinking about women empowerment, and of course, looking at the younger communities and how to be as inclusive as possible in this virtual ecosystem that we created online, of course, both of us with FT Talent and the female lead. So, Edwina, what is exactly has been behind the scenes, your creation of a female lead that has been such a fantastic thing to see on LinkedIn and social media?
Thank you. I think, I was an entrepreneur from the beginning. And when I finished my serious business, as I like to call it, I thought very hard about who I'd seen as an inspiration in my time working with retailers and manufacturers around the world. And I realized I saw no women at all, none in the boardroom, none in all my travels in every country. And it made me think about who we see when we are really being influenced. And I thought about school and the fact that when I was at school, you learned about old, dead women. You still learn about old Marie Curie, Ada Lovelace.
Yeah.
They're wonderful, but they're old and dead. And we have to realize that there are amazing women out there now. So my project is all about role models and how we can't be what we can't see. So it's about showing people that these women are alive and vibrant and inspiring today.
This is so interesting, because I'm going to go deeper a bit about that, because we actually realize that about journalism as well. When we talk about finance and business, every time we needed to connect it with an image, it was kind of like, immediate to put a picture of a man in a suit, maybe white even.
Yes.
And it wasn't as inclusive as possible with our audiences. And one of the reasons why we didn't get a lot of female readers was all about infographics and the pictures that we were picking. So changing how you present even a paper that is made of words, I think is so interesting what you're saying. So it's something that we needed to think about as well as Financial Times. And I think that's very interesting what you're mentioning. But from your perspective, so creating the female lead, if you had to describe the female lead and what you guys do, what it is all about, and what is your ethos of why building that?
So really, it's exactly what you've just described. It's the idea of making visible women and their achievements, their stories, so that, the whole variety of success, of ambition, of impact is seen. Because it is largely invisible. It's not that it doesn't exist, it's just not shown, it's not captured. And so I wanted to capture these wonderful stories and to share them with people that I thought it would have the greatest impact on. And initially, I thought that would be young people. And certainly that is still a major focus. But what I realized is the more I spoke to older girls and older women, the more I realized they still are looking for someone that they can relate to and say, I want to be like that.
I think this is so interesting what you said before about like what you study, the importance of school and the impact that your education has in your mindset and what you're also expected to be doing for society, for your family, and what you should represent, in a certain, mindset that we have out there, your expectations. But most of the time, these are not matching aspirations. So I think the amazing work that you're doing is you can aspire and be inspired by great women without forgetting that you're a woman as well.
Yes.
So how do you see this oxymoron of sometimes that we get as women that men don't really get, of picking one journey and not the other? And I think what you're trying to do is merging, the personal perspective and the career perspective.
Well, I think you mentioned two important things. One is that there are some societal expectations that women will be caring, that they will be the carers of society, and that women, are expected to, look a certain way. And those expectations have long trapped women in a cycle that is not altogether conducive to growing a career. What we studied with academics is the idea and the myths that exist around women not really being ambitious. Wrong. Women don't like taking risks. Wrong. Women, basically after having a baby, or if they choose to have a baby, nor really wanting to step back into the workplace. Wrong. There's a whole series of myths. The truth is, women are ambitious. They find fulfillment in a lot of cases at work, and it makes them feel whole. It makes them feel this is where I'm meant to be. And we wanted to show that that isn't just necessarily money or power. In a lot of ways, the course that women can take can lead to something really special and exciting, which is freedom. And freedom, of course, is a very joyous kind of sense of fulfillment. I am free to choose who I am and what I want to be. It's a new concept, truly.
And I think, now we are seeing so many more role models that go in that direction. And I think that's definitely what you're contributing to do. And, at the same time, a paper like ours, and generally what we're doing at the Financial Times or big corporation, what they should be doing is thinking about financial education first, and the importance of being able to manage money, or being aware on how to manage money, how to invest. That's one of the very first steps when it comes to freedom. And you're a founder, and of course you had a career that was in the business world, and you were saying, I didn't see a lot of women. And I think there are now more steps that we have been doing in education and financial education, business education. Now that we have more educated young girls out there, what is your view? What is your vision around financial education and generally the importance of money management for ladies?
Do you know what? This will not be popular, but I'm going to say it. For me, women have to grasp and be interested in money. Money is a fundamentally important key to taking the lead in your life and to actually discovering power and choice. And so, I would not have naturally gone to the FT, but through my business and my work, I found I really enjoyed it, because I learned about things that didn't naturally sit within my sphere. Money is something that women are really bad at engaging with right now. They show no interest. And in fact, part of the reason is that they're looking after the day-to-day. They're doing housekeeping. They're worried about paying the school fees, not bees, school fees. Sorry about that. And, they're very focused on that right now. What that means is they end up not investing themselves. They're likely to end up with smaller pensions, massively smaller pensions than men. Combine that with them tending to live longer, and even 1 in 2 women getting divorced, sadly,
Yeah.
women become very vulnerable. And so really, money is not about greed.
Yeah.
Money is about, taking that power
Yeah.
and making sure you give yourself the best possible chance in life.
And choices as well, and
Choices.
freedom of choices. And I think that's exactly what you said, something very interesting here about risk taking before, and I think it's quite connected to as well investment and an investment mindset. And we have this pre-concept of like women not taking as many risks as men because they overthink and they have 200 things more to put in the balance sheets of their decision making process. I'd love to ask you, as a founder, is very different from being an employee of an organization. What did it take to fund your own idea, company, and also get trust from investors and other businesses for you, as even if experienced, but still startupper investing in something new?
So I suppose partly I had the advantage. Well, the advantage. So I met my husband at work, and we worked for a big American corporate, and we had very good career. We learned a lot of skills and built our credibility in the market. And we actually wanted to stay in that business.
Okay.
But the business was seeing us as a profit source. And so it was really hard to reinvest in our business. And we had ideas. We were essentially innovators. And so we tried to persuade them to invest when we knew that that wasn't going to happen. My husband then at the time, who was my wonderful business partner, although strange construct in a big corporate business, said, I have to do this. I'm finding it very difficult to work in this environment. And I said, don't worry, because we'd just taken on a big mortgage. I said, don't worry, I'll stay and I'll pay the mortgage and you go work out what you really want to do. Which sounded really, really good until, long story short, when he finally resigned, I got fired 10 minutes later because the two of us would obviously be in cahoots and set up in competition. So it was very brutal ending. Okay. And suddenly, with a big mortgage behind us, well, in front of us, actually, and no income whatsoever, we were kind of propelled into this world of setting up a business. We had two choices, which was either get a job or write a business plan, raise some investment, and work like crazy. And we picked the latter. And we didn't really know what we were doing in terms of setting up a business, but we knew the business and we really knew what we wanted to do. We had that vision, we had that passion. And it was actually, although scary, it was actually quite liberating because we were actually then banking on what we thought the future was. So traumatic time. And then you combine that with the fact that 1 year after that, we then decided, hey, this is a really good time to have a family.
Okay.
It was kind of a rough ride. So was it considered? Was it planned? Not really. But I think when you're determined to do something, you kind of bend it into a shape that works for you. And, the one thing I discovered was that my husband and I were fantastic business partners, polar opposites, but we worked really well together. And that was it. We began.
I think what comes out of the story here, it's like the old Greek times. They always say that the crisis, the word of crisis is an interesting one because it's in the language actually means the moment of judgment where you actually decide what to do in a difficult time. And I always find this etymology so interesting because this is an example when you have something unexpected, like a black swan in your career that comes out, as we have all experienced as well when we had the COVID or other, critical moments in the last few years behind us. I think it's that moment where you actually know what you want and you know who you are. And if you're centered, you can really approach with, a visionary, and sometimes you might see as a crazy one going after a vision and taking a bit more risks. But I think what I can brief from this is that you knew what you wanted. Sometimes I believe that when we're talking about women empowerment, and we connect it most of the time with not being so sure of who we are and what we want. We talk about imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And that's one of the key words every time we connect with women. Even if I think also men they are affected. It's just I think girls tend to be a bit more vocal about it.
Yes.
And I would love to know about these. How did you approach? Were you ever affected by imposter syndrome?
Of course.
Yeah.
I doubted myself all the time. And I think that's good and healthy because it pushes you on, makes you work harder, makes you keep learning, makes you listen, makes you think.
Yeah.
Whereas the arrogance of complete self-assurance is almost narcissistic. So I think we should stop worrying about imposter syndrome. We all doubt ourselves, all of us. And I think we just have to keep saying that I believe in me. I believe in my ability to get out of a difficult situation, to problem solve when something seems insurmountable. And if I don't know how, I have friends, colleagues who can advise me. And that self-reliance is something that we really try and encourage and build on, which is we all have super strengths. Did you know that? We all have something that we find really easy and others find really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And we tend to undervalue that quality. Everything we're really good at, we go, well, that's easy. How many times have we gone, but it's not really important, it's easy. Yeah. Whereas actually, for other people looking at us, they think I can't do that. And so we're always looking over the fence and thinking that someone else has more than us, but they don't have what we have.
And what is your advice to youngers out there that are listening to us when you have that moments where you are not really truly believing in, for example, your leadership skill set, how you can set up to be, for the first time, the leader of a team? What is your advice to youngers to start, building up that regime of thinking about their soft skills as something that they can play with, that they can learn? I think leadership is something that you can learn by doing as much as you do with the hard skills. What is your advice around that? And how female lead do you think can help these youngers in this journey?
So I think it's a great question, and it's a really, really important one. I think being honest about, even in a leadership role, being honest about what you're good at and where you feel comfortable and sharing that with your team is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of respect and strength. And actually calling out from them, what are your strengths? Yeah. You start to immediately build a respectful team, which is, I don't have everything. I don't know all the answers, but this is why I think I've been put in this position. This is why I've been selected or given the chance to be a leader. Therefore, I must rely and trust that someone sees in me those qualities. And then it's your job as a, evolving leader to see the qualities in the people around you and say, okay, let's bring that out. Let's rely on that. Let's depend on each other to bring those qualities into a kind of rounded skill set. And that's really, isn't that what leadership is all about? Which is we just bring the best of ourselves to the group, and then we all together solve that problem.
What I think this green sofa most of the time does is that it really allows this in conversation style. So now I really want to revert the question. Let's say that you are not entitled to be a leader yet, but you feel you are. Maybe the environment you're working for and you're working with is not seeing that yet in you. and you need to shine. I do believe, and this would be an advice for any young person out there that is listening to us, either girls or boys or whatever gender they feel they belong to. How do you advise these young people to, without arrogance, start pushing themselves out there to really express their leadership skill set and how they can build up their profile to be a leader? We're talking about empowerment here today. So what is your what are your thoughts around that? How do you think we can approach the reverted, I'm not a leader, I'm not there yet, but I feel I can be?
So I think the first step is really being bold enough to share your voice, to share your opinion. It's not about shouting the loudest. It's not about saying I'm right and everybody else is wrong. But I notice sometimes there's a real reluctance to speak your mind and to say, I'm thinking this, or I'm worried that we're going in the wrong direction. And can we just re-engage as to what the mission is? And I think speaking out is something that people are very scared of doing because they're scared of someone laughing at them or pointing at them saying you're wrong. And actually, until you get over that, you're never, ever going to be a leader. I mean, I've been a leader for a long time. I mean, not necessarily of the biggest company or, you know, in the best leader even. But you learn that you speak your mind and that you're judged on that. And sometimes you're wrong and sometimes you're proved to be wrong. How you handle that and what you do next is what makes you a leader over time and hopefully ultimately a respected leader, because leaders don't know all the answers. And I think if your audience or our audiences think that, I would say, you know, leaders are just people who can get the best out of all the team around them. And that's it.
And, you know, like leadership most of the time is connected with networking, ability to build your own network and relying on your best allies, and how you build that little army around yourself is what really empowers you. And you definitely did with the female leads. You have an amazing network, more than 4 million followers on LinkedIn. And it's really like, I think, like-minded people all together and really being inspired on finding, you know, new inspirations through the stories that you're sharing. When we're thinking about the rewarding aspect about these stories and mentoring, for example, what I've seen that we tend to do lately, but sometimes we're a bit reluctant, or at least we have the stereotype that women are a bit reluctant to do so, to mentor like more senior women, to mentor younger women. Do you have any examples around that? Do you want to break this other myth that, you know, more senior women do want to help the younger self? Or do you have some, you know, as well preconceptions around like men do the men's club and the boys club and girls do not do so?
Oh, there are definitely men's clubs. I mean, there are women's clubs now, but I just worry that women, if they just talk to women, you know, we're just going to continue the cycle. I think
totally agree with you.
We need to have conversations right across the board. You know, I think women need to get comfortable with asking questions of others and learning from them, and put aside worries about being judged in any way. Curiosity to me is my number one value. I am endlessly curious. I'm interested in people. I'm interested in their stories. I think you can learn so much from others. A network is not using people. It's not something that you have to worry about, oh, I'm going to a network event. I've got to do something that's unnatural for me. And I think people get themselves into that mindset. A network is where you can find people that you are genuinely interested in because they've done something that you don't know how to do that they might have already done. And actually, all you have to do is be brave enough to ask them the question, how did you do that? How did you feel when you did that? Did you know you were doing the right thing? People love to talk about themselves. Any woman knows the best way to have a great conversation with someone they're attracted to is to ask them about themselves.
That's true.
Right? It's just simple. So networking is the same. You ask someone, how did you get to be that? That's really impressive. Were there bad times? What were the good times? That's networking. And the more you ask, the more you're curious, genuinely. The worst thing you do is ask a question and then look bored.
Oh, or don't listen to us.
I mean, you're not going to get invited back to the event. So be genuine, be authentic, but ask the question. And then gradually you get all these ideas of how someone else did it. And I think that's super exciting. And that's the fundament of the female lead, because we basically collect all these women and basically we learn how did they do it, and they tell the most amazing stories.
And I feel like, we all think that innovators just reinvent the wheel every time. If there is one thing that I learned in the past few years, reading more about inspiring stories from, of course, the ancient times as well as the current times, is like nobody really invented anything. It's like how you get inspired. I always share this story that is more from my Italian DNA, but Steve Jobs, to create these amazing tools that we have as a MacBook and all Apple, was yes, of course, a genius and inspired by many other leaders. But when you look at design, and what he was inspired by was by Olivetti, that was an Italian typewriter design firm in the 60s. And it was like it's just so interesting that every leader, every innovator just get inspired by others. And we're kind of reluctant because if you need to be genius and invent something from scratch.
You're so right, because you reminded me we build on the shoulders of others. And this is something you said, and I really wanted to respond, and you've just given me another chance, which is, if all women actually played a role of being a role model, so even if they're 22 years old, they can still be a role model to someone who's 12 or 10. And so everybody can be a role model. If everybody holds out a hand and helps someone forward, we would not be in the situation we're in today. But we don't. I mean, the truth is we don't. And it's the fear that by helping others, we're going to undermine ourselves is really negative, and it's holding us back. The most scary thing is to think that we might be holding ourselves back by not helping someone forward. And that's what we need to do.
And I think this is so interesting because we push so much for this at FT Talent specifically, but we are all a very young and fresh team. But what we believe in is like trying to bring more even fresher and brighter and younger minds within our ecosystem will just help us all. And I think this growth mindset, rather than a fear mindset or a fixed mindset, is what most of the time we don't really teach in schools, and we don't really get that psychological attitude to think about flexible hierarchies. We just think that once you get the chair, you get there, and you need to hold it. And I believe that in the last few years, initiatives like yours, of course, are helping women that are kind of new as well to very hierarchical positions to think about giving back attitudes as a way to really express themselves at the best as leaders, of course. Because if there is one thing I've learned being just sometimes a mentee or a mentor, is that you learn so much more when you are trying to not really teach you something new, but be of use of the younger self. And seeing yourself reflected in the other person really helps you just even thinking about your own journey. And I do not know if you have any stories that you would like to share on the impact that sharing an interesting story or even like, journey of another founder has helped other girls or other leaders in, pushing themselves forward?
Yes, I mean, I think we have lots of stories of young girls who've met someone that they admire, and it's not always someone that, I would particularly say, oh, this woman
Yeah.
is amazing. But when they identify who they most admire and they most look up to, if they get a chance to talk to that person or even read about them at the sort of simplest level, the effect can be really dramatic. And we proved this with research over 5 years. So we took a whole cohort of girls, different ages, to meet with their different role models from all walks, all spheres of life. So not just business, but all sorts of different areas: sport, arts, humanitarian work. And we've introduced them. And then we went back 5 years later and asked them, did that moment, that short 10-minute moment, did it have any impact? Yes, it changed a lot. Do you still think about that? Does it still have an impact? Yes, it changed everything. And I find that so hard to believe, that this tiny little moment, this tiny gift at that moment can make all the difference in the world. And I think, I could give you, 20 stories right now of where we've seen that happen, and girls who didn't even know that job or that role existed, where they're suddenly inspired and they say, I'm no longer going to do this job. I'm gonna go in this direction. Completely changed.
What I think it's this quite interesting, especially for younger audiences, that we feel so overwhelmed due to this complicated and, I always say, a bit cacophonic infosphere with 200 events, too many opportunities, 200 posts to read and be inspired by, to really select the things that we wanted to do. So how do you filter? How can we filter the right things, the good quality things, to make our journey a bit, better and not just so stressful? Because, as we were saying before, excitement is connected to anxiety.
Yes.
And I think when you are entering in this job market, it can get a bit stressful for not the most strongest extroverts and personalities out there. Do you have any advice for girls that are approaching maybe, networking for the first time, as many of our listeners today, the very first time maybe they are going for a job interview or a job networking chat? What would be your one piece of advice for them? You have been doing this for a very long time.
For me, and I think it would come very naturally to you and your team, the key thing is to work out who's going to be there, do a little bit of homework, who's going to be there, do a little bit of research, go online, see what that person cares about, what they're passionate about, not just the really obvious stuff, but the kind of the interesting thing. Do they support something beyond their immediate work and how they're known generally in the industry? That little bit of knowledge, if you have the opportunity to talk to that person, will surprise them and impress them, because you've taken the trouble to find out about them. And I think, conversations are always two-way. And I would really urge young people not to think, I'm nervous, therefore I'm just going to ask a really obvious question that anybody could ask. I'm going to show that I've gone that step further. And I mean, not creepy, not like, not digging really deep, but a really...
I've seen you 2 weeks ago posted about that amazing shop. I went there. So.
Yeah, and I bought exactly the same thing as you. No. So not like that, but just something that shows curiosity, respect, and to frame something that is a positive conversation you can have with that person. you know, it would cut through everything else. We have found, and again, we've proved that you can follow a lot of things. You can follow cookery, you can follow art, travel, skiing, the Kardashians, whatever you want. But ultimately, in the sphere where you are interested and where you're really passionate in going, pick 3 or 4 people who epitomize what you're interested in and follow them. And that will change you, your knowledge base, and your readiness for the job market and networking better than anything else. So just 3 or 4, you know, in your field that will set the bar really high for you that you can learn from. But you can do it on social. It takes 5 minutes a day.
This is so interesting when we're talking about how you filter your social media and where you basically put your attention, because we are in the attention economy. Everything is about our time. We always think that currency is connected to money. I'm way more convinced that it's connected to time and quality time, where we are spending it, what are we reading, what kind of data are we grasping, and also we are giving out when reading or, you know, engaging with certain content. And of course, we are here to talk about how empowering good content can be, both from, you know, an FT perspective and the female leader perspective. And when it comes to your importance of data, you've been sharing a lot that you did a lot of research. You work with academia, you work with universities and schools. How important is to share the right data in surveys and research to really empower people in their decision-making process, or like to make up their mind for certain, you know, contexts?
So there are 2 sides to that question. It's a really, really important question. One is, I think data benefits all of us if we can understand who we are and how we relate to others. You know, are we the type of person that likes enjoyment, or that likes power, or that likes control, or that likes variety? Those differences make us who we are. Understanding brand me is really important. So that's one aspect. So brand me for each and every person is really crucial, because that self-awareness will build confidence. And what we hear from our audience over and over again is, how do I build confidence? Building confidence is about knowing who you are and actually learning about the people that you admire, learning about the people that you work with, and that creates that knowledge and that respect. So that's one element. Second element is really important, which is my mission, which is how can we use data on women from a rich, deep resource. From, like, the survey we've created has already been completed by 130,000 women. It will be 200,000 by the end of the year. That data is unparalleled. You know, that data on women, it does not exist anywhere else. So once we know what women really care about in their life and in their work and how they balance that, so money, work, health, relationships, all of these things, once we understand that, we can then say to business, to government, here's what women really care about. This is how it breaks down by age. This is how it breaks down by industry sector, all of those things. And then we can design better processes and policies that actually fit to what women want, rather than what men think women want.
This is so interesting because, you know, like, it connects to so many data out there, even if I'm thinking about the medical sector. How, you know, medical books have been written.
And not tested on women.
Ever.
Exactly.
Which is so interesting. And it's like, it really goes across so many sectors, even when talking about mental health or, like, you know, childcare. Every time it's been like the assumptions rather than the real data. And I think this is, a problem that you see reflected as well on technology and the assumptions that artificial intelligence makes on the decision-making processes or the results that they might get, because they are mostly designed by a man brain rather than a women brain that we know that work in with different assets and with different expectations as well from the system. So I think there has been a lot of work in the world of artificial intelligence and machine learning to make it as inclusive as possible. There is a long way to go. Now that we are seeing so many more girls entering in, for example, the engineering and technological world way more than they used decades ago. It doesn't mean that it didn't exist or they weren't impacting, but of course, numbers and volumes do impact the results of a tool like any technological one. I would really love to go about the education side of what we are discussing here, because if there is one thing that we know is one of the best investments with the highest return is on women's education. And this goes across the board, has been said by the UN, is one of their UN goals. And I think Female Lead does a lot with universities and schools. We are trying our best as well, offering, for example, FT content for free from secondary schools onwards to any kids out there.
Brilliant.
What is your view on working with schools and working with the young, very, very, very young women and boys in their education and as well, human process and evolution?
I think the truth is that children become aware of limitations at quite a young age. So unless they see the right content, unless their minds are allowed to open and be directed in areas that have sort of until now been closed off, the pathway gets re-triggered and re-triggered. So for me, getting into schools is absolutely fundamental. And, we try and gift what we do, films, books, teaching materials, ideas. We try and gift it to every school for free. And that is our purpose. That is our mission. And I think it's because if you wait later, if you wait longer, the programming is there. And how are we ever going to break it? How are we ever going to stop? I mean, these things. It's really tragic. But, of course, we want to tell our daughters that they're beautiful. But we also want to tell them that they're courageous and that they're strong and that they are meant to be leaders in the world. We still don't do that because, as you rightly said at the beginning, when you Google it, leaders are all men. When you Google it, entrepreneurs are all men. I mean, who can spontaneously name female entrepreneurs? We all say Branson and Dyson and Musk. And that's it. And we repeat them. And girls are still going Marie Curie and Ada Lovelace. And so we're in this kind of trap, aren't we? So we have to change. We have to be able to say Claire Smith is one of the most brilliant chefs in the world. We have to be able to say Christiane Amanpour is an amazing CNN reporter. We have to be able to say my mind's gone blank. Ava DuVernay is a terrific film director, and once we can start saying this, it becomes normal.
And I think that's really what is in the power of media and representation. That's why communicating news in an inclusive way is so powerful for society, and the way we are representing society as truly is, because don't forget that we are 52% of the market out there, which I mean that it's very interesting from a business perspective to be attractive for women as a product, as a service, or as anything, because we are more than half of the world out there. So I think representing women in an inclusive way is not just because we want to be fair, but you want to be efficient with the business mind and mindset. And I think if there is one thing that from an entrepreneurial angle, I do not know if you agree with me, but every time we're talking about diversity and inclusion or equality, we always make it as a nice to have or something that is more a HR thing. Or I love making it a business case. I love to bring it back to numbers. If you're looking at the most performing Fortune 500 companies, they are the ones that do have the most equal and inclusive boards. Why is that? I do believe it's because you can really see the different shapes and shades of the market out there, what is interesting for customers, and you just don't have one perspective. That is a problem that we have with medical books or all the services that are not really shaped for the other half of the market. Did you see, or do you think that you can help businesses with what you're doing with the female leads?
I really hope so, but I think what you're doing as the FT, being a leading media presence and voice and powerhouse, what you're doing is really important. That's why I'm here. I love that you're doing this. I love that you're representing all the supremely clever women who you really want to draw into this community, and they're missing out by not being here. I really honestly believe that, you know, it is all about understanding how business works that is going to ignite the next set of entrepreneurs, and they're all out there now.
Yeah.
And they're probably thinking, gosh, I'm a bit different and I'm a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And what we have to say to them is, do you know, that's possibly a really good thing, because you're going to think differently, you're going to come at a problem differently, and you're going to do something that no one else has constructed or thought about before. So I think we love... your point on diversity is that, for me, neurodiversity is one of the most exciting areas. We want to encourage people to think differently, to bring people together so that we get that different vision, because that's where innovation and entrepreneurial spark is going to happen. That's real diversity. And you're absolutely right. We're not doing it because it's good and nice. We're doing it because women make great leaders. Women make great entrepreneurs. Look at Jo Malone and what she's achieved. Quite phenomenal. And she's done it twice, not once, because she got, she was fed up the first time. So she did it again. Bobby Brown, you know, also done it again and really determined to do it again. So we, you know, women are great business entrepreneurs, and they all talk. All the ones who did it said, yeah, I stuck out a bit, I was a bit odd at school, or I wasn't very good at school. Actually, I wasn't great at school, I have to say. So that's the excitement. You can be different.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think, you know, we have a bit more of this stigma, and I'm going to go to question very, very quickly. So I know I see we have many, so keep going with the questions I see, and I'm going to start now. And I think there is a bit more of a stamp or a stigma around diversity for women rather than for boys. And I have a question for you. You know, most of the time when a very dynamic woman and you're maybe, you know, an entrepreneur, have so many passions. If you're a man, you're cool. If you are a woman, you're like, you know, a bit crazy or unreachable, and it's like, oh, you're too much work. How do you go about that? What is your advice for girls that, you know, maybe feel they want to express the max of their potential and really fulfill the different passions they have, but maybe sometimes, you know, like you don't really fit in the garden where you're stuck?
I mean, please tell me that no one thinks the entrepreneurs who are male that I mentioned are completely normal, right? No. So like, yeah, but they're really rich and really powerful. So, you know, I mean, that's good too. So I think if someone feels that, because it's not just about making money, it's about doing what you believe in. And I think, who cares what anybody else thinks, really? Honestly? I mean, surely that can't be. I think when you're younger, you worry about it. As you get older, You don't worry about it so much. And most of the time I hear women say they wish they told their younger self,
Oh, yeah.
right? Don't worry so much about whether you're perfect or your body's perfect or you say something in exactly the right way. Just focus on the fact that you're doing something that you believe in, and that you're doing it with all your might, all your power, all your passion. Because actually, I think that's how you have the most fun. It's not an easy journey, though, because you are likely to be called odd for a while.
I think so, and it's like, you know, like I'm speaking from a perspective of like, I still gonna do it. I have fun and I want to enjoy life. I think life is very short, and you really need to try to make the most out of it and really enjoy it as much as possible. Thinking about work and career and your own development as part of this journey, and don't forget what you really care about. There might be other aspect of your life that you want to focus on, and I think it's completely legit. And I just think that sometimes when I speak to younger girls, they are a bit more impacted by the fact that I might not be able to do all of this because
perfectionism. Oh my goodness, this is a female invented real trap, real problem. I mean, honestly, and every entrepreneur would say on this couch to you, they are so far from perfect. Everything they've done is not perfect, but the forward momentum is what carries it through. Perfectionism is a trap. And my encouragement would be to say to girls, find out what you're good at, focus on that. Don't worry so much about what you're not good at, and stop worrying about ticking all the boxes. You don't have to. Because if you have the energy and the will to do it, and you have half of the qualities and skills, you're probably going to be pretty good. And, you know, the determination to do it is probably as important as you need some of the skills, but you don't need all of them. And I would say perfectionism is the biggest trap. And worrying that you shouldn't ask for a pay rise or a promotion because you did that one thing wrong last year. It's like, write down all the things you did and why that company would really miss you if you walked away, and you'll suddenly realize, I'm quite good.
Exactly. And I think like self-reflection, not being so afraid of having that little bit of, and I don't want to touch on arrogance, but, you know, being a bit more brave.
Owning your accomplishments.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And I think this should be taught a bit more to girls from a very young age, because I think it's what is pushing us a bit behind compared to other people in especially in corporations, but I think generally in life, like pushing a bit yourself up there and start also not giving too much attention to what other people think, and what is the reflection of yourself on is what the story you're telling. Am I gonna be seen as a successful but also as a lonely? Because that's something, you know, at the same time that I see a lot, how much younger girls are afraid of being the loner. Because they are trapped in their success story or whatever they want to be. As like, oh, I want really to focus on my career, but who said that you want to forget about your family or your love or whatever it is what is important and meaningful to you? For example, art. And I just think, you know, like we are so used to siloed personalities and careers and stories. And what I love about the female lead is like you really give a well-rounded understanding of the humans. And I think this is so important. Always think about, and this is something for the audience, think about your story as a human story, not like me as a professional, me as a mother, me as a daughter. And I think it's like, who are you as Edwina? Who are you as Virginia? And I think this will empower so much more people in giving their own story and version to themselves about what they want to do.
I mean, you can't have it all at the same time.
Exactly.
You can only have some of it some of the time. And I think we all go through stages in our life where we feel, I'm a bit out of balance with this. And you know, it's such it's such a challenge to think, yes, it's a bit imbalanced now, but it will right itself and I will come through it. And to be kind to yourself and forgive yourself for being a bit one-dimensional at times.
Forgiving yourself, and I think it's a
forgive yourself.
Very important tip here. I think we can go to questions. So thank you for, of course, all your insights, Edwina. But now we have, of course, a question from the audience. And I see Kirsty that is asking, how do you manage stress and look after your mental health as an entrepreneur?
Well, we do know entrepreneurs have it toughest with mental wellness. I think the burden on it's a very lonely role. It's a very lonely job. So I think this is a very good question, because it is lonely, and you know, you have to find a couple of people around you that you can trust and show vulnerability to. Because I think, you know, once you are an entrepreneur, you think, oh, I'm a leader. I've got to be the all-seeing eye. I've got to be really strong. I've never got to show any weakness or failure. You need to find a couple of people who will share with you and you will share with them. I had a really bad day. I feel awful. And I just need to, you know, either get in a bath and have a long soak, go for a run, or drink a bottle of wine. I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying it might happen occasionally. And although I would not recommend alcohol long term, you have to unload. You have to be kind to yourself and say, you know, my daughter is now an entrepreneur. My next generation, she's 30 years old, 31, I think. And every year we have one of the best times ever together, where we sit down and we write. Will you forgive me if I swear very slightly?
I am all about forgiveness.
I'm in the FT, but we write our shit list. Okay. And our shit list is really powerful, because we write all the worst things that happened that year. The worst unkindnesses, the worst cruelty, the worst failures. And we have a glass of wine while we're doing it. And by the end of it, we're laughing and say, no, I can beat you. What about this one?
That's good.
And we have this list and we keep it. And you know, it is cathartic. Truly cathartic. Because once we say it, it no longer has power over us. And we had a bad time, but we survived and we've come through it. So you have to let your hair down, speak it, tell it to someone who you trust, and be vulnerable sometimes.
That's very good. Thank you so much. So I got Charlotte here. You are both incredible women. Thank you, Charlotte. What are some of your daily habits that help to keep you motivated? What about you?
Well, I think we should both answer this. What are my daily habits? Oh my goodness. I work really hard. I must admit that. But I believe in what I do, and I have to find joy every day. That's the thing that I most focus on. I don't go and run a 5-miler or a 5K.
Not a good
or
runner
something like that. I do reflect on the good that I felt, if only for a moment in a day. And sometimes, I say it was a disaster today.
Okay.
And so I'm just really honest about it. And if I've had a bad day, it's like when you don't sleep for a night and you feel really terrible the next day and you go, I really didn't sleep, but boy, will I sleep tonight.
Yeah.
It's like, I had a bad day. I'm probably not going to have another really bad day tomorrow.
Yeah. For me, in terms of daily habits, maybe what is interesting, I try to keep this daily journal that is more focused on things that motivated me or made me happy that day. It's like, I don't want to frame this as all the happy moments of my day, but it's most of the time, it's something that is related to business or some encounters, things that I've learned from a certain some person or something I listened to that inspired me. And I think like what I've noticed is like keeping a note of things just doesn't get confused or slipped our minds when we get a bit overwhelmed with the daily tasks. When you go back to this kind of like vademecum of great things I've learned and I've seen in the past month, maybe you see what is your personal experience of what you're doing and the great opportunity that you had in that particular job. Or most of the time I always reflect, shall I go to that event? I'm so tired, I shouldn't. I'm like, I'm not gonna really miss out. But then I'm going back to that journal most of the time where I was like, oh, there I met that great person, or I listened to that 1 second of piece of advice that really changed my perspective on something. So if I note it down, I can remember. So my my little tip for you, Charlotte, is like maybe if you have your Apple or Android notes, just take a note of things that you learned that day and reread it. It's always very helpful.
And if you haven't got anything nice that happened that you did record, read someone else's book where they did something interesting. Or, I mean, I love a novel.
Yeah, that's very true, because you can live someone else's life.
You can live someone else's life. And sometimes it's better.
Yeah, and sometimes it's good to escape from your daily trap. So that's Tam here asking you something, Edwina. We hear a lot about young women under 30s. There is not a lot of support out there over a certain age. What trends do you see about other age ranges? Very interesting, Tam. Thank you.
So the female lead specifically says we are for every age and every stage. So this is a really important question, and obviously we're very active on social media, and social media tends to skew a bit younger.
Yeah.
But as an older woman myself, I am very passionate that we do talk about, things like ageism, things like health, things about fulfillment in life. What does fulfillment mean when you're, 50 plus, 60 plus, 70 plus? What does fulfillment mean? And I don't think it's been talked about. I don't think it's been particularly studied. I hope we'll do a lot more research into that so that we can talk about it genuinely. I think every woman needs to have inspiration and stimulus, whatever her age. And I think it is a bit sparse as you get slightly older in what we see today. But achievement does not get sparse as we get older. A lot of our female leads tilt towards the older age groups, which is kind of logical because sometimes it takes a long time and a lot of mistakes to get to the top of wherever it is you're trying to get.
I think, like we have so much to learn from senior leaders, and especially from women that have been there in your position. We've also not the advantages that, let's admit, society, Western society, allows or let us have as younger women. I think we have a bit more conscious mindset around us, especially in boardrooms, especially in the decision-making processes of corporates and the policies. There is a bit more of a flexible mindset, or at least I do believe that the institutions are on the listening side. There was a blind eye, I think, before. So I guess learning from the experience of how did you make it when you were there in even way more difficult circumstances is so interesting, especially for younger women. So I think the question here was about the support, and but also the kind of support you can get from younger mentors. It's fundamental because we get from cross mentorship.
Sometimes we do panels with young girls from the schools that we work with, and sometimes their questions and their comments make you take a sharp intake of breath because their perspective is so different and fresh and actually really invigorating sometimes. So, we talk a lot about mentoring. I mean, it is two-way.
Thank you. And from Peru, we got, hi, Edwina and Virginia. Thanks so much for facilitating this conversation. Thanks to you for listening. How can we work alongside men to make a bigger impact? It's a big question.
Oh, that is, for me, it's the time for this is now. I think we've spent quite a long time talking about what is wrong for women in society today. We talk about a world that's been made by men for men. And there's a lot where we're gathering evidence of all the things that don't work and aren't fair and the bias, etc. We now have to move into, right, how do we change it? How do we ensure that this is not a tick box, but actually positive action because it's good for business, it's good for society? And I think to do that, Prue, we absolutely need to speak with men. And I think what I hope to do with my sort of data science hat on is bring compelling evidence to the fact that women aren't a nice to have, they're a must have. And that we will only be, really motoring as an economy, as a society, when women are treated in a way that has some sense of balance and parity. So that conversation is essential. How we do it, when we do it, kind of watch this space. I'm still figuring it out. But I hope to use that research and evidence to create compelling stories that cannot be dismissed as emotion or anecdote.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's like, one thing that I love and never learned by staying here at the Financial Times is like most of the time bringing the conversation and having the conversation together is so important, especially on some editorial decision making processes. I've seen that both men and women do work together, and that's something that I acknowledged. I'm not part of a newsroom, so I just watch this. But what I found very interesting has been the kind of listening process that we got in terms of like seeing the perspective of different experts. Because if there is one thing that I think we tend to forget is when we were talking about representation, is also the experts that we ask advice or interviews to, that really makes a different impact on not just the view of the world, but also the perception of an audience. If you only read, and that's data from European papers that says that in Europe, only 16% of women are the experts that do get called by a TV show or a newspaper to get and ask data and their expert eye. And most of the time it's just based on our basic networks. We always went to those 20 experts that happen to be men, maybe in science. We had the same case during COVID, for example, about politics, about whatever you want, like leadership. And so it gets a bit of a skewed perspective. The most interesting panels, the most interesting conversations I had is when you can mix these different perspectives of the words and really get an inclusive cultural product. And that's, I think, what a media enterprise should be doing, as yours and what we're trying to do here at FT as well. Is not female lead FT Talent tonight is just for women because it's about women empowerment. No, you as what we have encouraged to do for our audiences as well, like if you're a man and you're listening to this, how you can empower your colleague, how you can start collaborating with a different mindset or just learn something new from another side of not such a different world. Because again, I think we get a bit of more these stereotypes of like you're a woman so you're gonna act like that. No, let's think, as we were saying before, as Virginia, I'm acting like that, but maybe a man would act the same exact way as I'm doing. And it's just a bias, a cultural bias that I'm doing that because I'm a woman. And I think if we can just switch the conversation with making it human, as you were saying, I think it's fundamental. So we got another question from Dawn. If you had to name one thing older female leaders can learn from younger ones and vice versa. what would you name of the thing that an older female leader can learn from a younger one?
I think the naturalness with which they are, you know, so open to many cultures, you know, many, you know, diverse groups of people. I think, you know, what's so refreshing is this, it's almost like breathing in their world. And I think, you know, they don't really see bias in anything. They don't express any bias in what they do. And then suddenly they come into a world where there are all these sort of hidden agendas and things, and they think, why? You know, it's not transparent. Policies and processes in a lot of places are not transparent. So the question that I think must ring through so many heads is why? Why is that tilt, that bias there?
Yeah.
Because they don't see it. And I think if they had the voice, if we gave them the power and the voice, I think we'd end up with some really positive and interesting solutions. Mind you, we might also find out that everybody would permanently work at home and nobody would come into the office, which I'm not sure works for everybody. But you know, I think I think it's about being respectful to the different voices. I think certainly all the young people I've come across have surprised me with their absolute transformational ability and talent. The lady that runs our social media had never done it before.
What is her name?
Lauren.
Okay, Lauren. I know she's making this possible. So
changed our world. And she was young, relatively and well qualified, but relatively experienced. She came and did magic for the female lead. I couldn't have dreamt it, let alone delivered it. She did that.
So I think what you're saying is that you trusted her.
Yes.
So I think that relationship of trust, because the question was about vice versa, what maybe I can answer on what younger leaders can learn from more senior female leaders, is that trust and how to, first of all, trust yourself, to push yourself out there, but especially the trust relationship that you can build with a more senior leader, either female or male. But it's fundamental to really give you the strength to try and test new things. And what I love is when someone trusts that you're going to fail, because like giving you the space to make mistakes as well and allow you to do so is something that you can learn a lot from more experienced leaders that are so busy with other things that no, by default they're going to make mistakes. And I think there is one piece of thing that I've learned, for example, from my older boss, Kay, that he knew he was making mistakes and I would have made mistakes, but he allowed me to test and trial. And I think that's a very interesting skills, but when you're young, you're in that perfectionist trap, and you don't want to try, and it's like just experience and have a go. And
because you learn more when you make a mistake than you
Exactly.
do when it works fine. Because when it works fine, you will go, I wonder why. When it goes wrong, you know, like you're like, I will never do that again.
We have time for other 2 questions, so we're going to answer them in radiophonic times. Tony is asking you, what is the best piece of career advice you have ever received?
Oh, just keep looking forward. Don't worry about the past. Don't get wrapped up in what you didn't do or what you didn't know. Mistakes. Look forward and bring your best self to the job. And the best team. I loved what you said about the confidence of bringing in brilliant people and not worrying if they're cleverer than you or better than you. Because like she who has the best team wins, right?
Exactly.
So the best team and look forward.
Yeah, I agree. And this is like the growth mindset. Is like how to have a growth mindset. You can read a lot about this, Tony, and I guess in both our media spaces you can find a lot about growth mindsets. But really, to me, is all about thinking about the team and the network rather than the individual. And I think taking the selfish aside and really making the good acquisitions, not in terms of like products, but in terms of people, is really mind-blowing and fundamental. So last question, have you ever had an experience of perceived failure in a task or role? And if so, how did you recover and regroup? Thanks, Dawn.
Do you know, I couldn't even begin with how many mistakes I've made. I mean, so many. I think, how do you recover? You take responsibility. Do you know the people I love the most are the ones who walk in and go, I think I messed up.
Yeah.
And I love their bravery. Yeah. I love their honesty. You know, the hardest people to deal with are the ones who will never admit that they did something wrong. And it's so annoying. You know it, they know it, and they won't admit it. So people who say, I made a mistake, it's like, all right, well done. You know it, you won't do it again. Good on you. You're a better person.
Yeah, I think it's like, you know, like recovering from a mistake is like just trying to think more about it, and but not also overthinking. It's like once you shout it, like there is this beautiful quote that is like, once a thing are said, they change the meaning. And but once they are said, you already change the meaning and you should just shift it. It's I think it's just important to be vocal about mistakes. And, you know, we are trapped in this success CV story that, you know, in our CV, we should always write just about our exciting things that we've been doing. But what I loved is what I've tried to do as well on my own CV is like things that didn't work and the things I tried. And most of the time when you get asked like, oh, but why I see here that you moved from this space to another space. If you have the right story, if you can walk people through that mistake and what you learned out of it, I think that's an amazing piece of your CV. And let's have a CV of failures most of the time for ourselves. I think it's so important. Like your curriculum vitae is all about...
Not to be read on a bad day.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe on good days you read like about like what you learned out of that and you don't repeat it again. So I think this was great, Edwina. I really can't thank you more for this evening together. I hope you enjoyed it. But of course, I hope our audience enjoyed the conversation tonight. Of course, do follow, if you don't, Female Lead. Do follow their amazing content they are giving you every single day. We are FT Talent here at the Financial Times. Do read the FT if you happen to. We have a lot of freebies for you. If you look at the FT Edit, is a new introductory product that we have here at FT. Give you 8 stories that are exciting. You can try the app for a month for free. So just have a go if you want to be informed. And Edwina, I cannot thank you enough for this lovely conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Stay tuned for another House of Talent night soon. Thank you, Edwina.